Russia's success in Crimea was followed quickly by a more slow-moving operation in eastern Ukraine. It remains unclear to what extent the protests in the east were initiated by local dissatisfaction with the situation in Kiev, and to what extent they were organized and supported from Russia, and whether the conflict that emerged was a civil war or an invasion has divided scholars and analysts along predictable lines. Clearly, there were elements of both local separatism and Russian support, and the mix likely differed in different places. The dichotomy being argued over is at least in part a false one. Many violent conflicts have elements of both international and civil wars. In Ukraine, the distinction between internal and supported by Russia has never been clear, because Russia consistently supported and encouraged those in Ukraine who sought closer ties with Russia. Those who supported greater autonomy for eastern regions and closer relations with Russia naturally looked to Russia for support, and Russia was eager to provide it. As time went on, Russia's direct involvement became harder to deny, and played a growing role in sustaining the anti-Kiev forces. In places where there was little internal support for separatism, Russian assistance was unable to generate a sustainable movement. But where there was more substantial internal support, Russia was able to provide the organization, intelligence, encouragement, money, and arms to enable relatively small groups to sustain serious challenges to the Ukrainian government. And when the Ukrainian state regrouped and threatened to defeat the separatist movements in August 2014, Russia's intervention with regular army units was decisive in defeating Ukrainian forces and maintaining the separatist governments of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. On March 1st, as the Crimea operation was progressing, pro-Russia activists occupied regional administration buildings in several eastern and southern Ukrainian regions, but pro-government forces quickly retook control. On April 7th, forces occupying the state administration buildings in Donetsk and Kharkiv declared the establishment of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Kharkov People's Republic. The Luhansk People's Republic appears to have first been declared by a crowd of separatists outside the Luhansk State Administration Building on April 27th. The Ukrainian government tried to respond with a hard line, with the new Interior Minister Arsen Avakov setting an April 11th deadline for separatists to evacuate government buildings. The deadline passed without incident because there was no one that the Ukrainian government could call on to eject the occupiers. The regional administration building in Kharkiv was surrendered quickly. In contrast, on April 12th, gunmen seized government buildings around Donetsk in a series of coordinated attacks. The police chief in Donetsk Oblast, Konstantin Pozhedayev, resigned at the demand of protesters. On April 13th, the Ukrainian government declared an anti-terrorist operation, ATO, in the eastern part of the country. This terminology was adopted to frame the action as a select targeting of terrorists rather than the population or territory of eastern Ukraine. Acting President Turchinov recognized the delicacy of the situation. The government sought to reverse the separatist seizures without alienating the broader population, most of whom, it was assumed, did not support the separatists, but would be alienated by a heavy-handed military intervention. The Donbas is in colossal danger. Besides the Russian special forces, besides terrorists, Donbas also has hundreds of people who have been deceived by Russian propaganda. And besides them are hundreds of thousands of completely innocent Ukrainians. That is why an anti-terrorist operation must be carried out responsibly. Meanwhile, the UN released a report saying that, although there were some attacks against the ethnic Russian community, these were neither systematic nor widespread. And pointing to misinformed reports and greatly exaggerated stories of harassment of ethnic Russians by Ukrainian nationalist extremists. The Ukrainian government was unprepared to address this challenge in the east for three reasons. First, the upper levels of the state security services had been hollowed out and were yet to be rebuilt. Second, the lower-level security forces in the region were both unsympathetic to the new government in Kiev and were likely disoriented by the rapidly shifting chain of command. Many supported the separatists or stood aside. Third, some eastern Ukrainian elites supported the separatist efforts, increasing the legitimacy of separatists and raising the level of force that would be needed to retake seized buildings. Had the Kiev government used violence against the occupiers, it would likely have escalated the conflict, just as it happened when Yanukovych used force against the protesters in Kiev. Finally, the Ukrainian armed forces were utterly incapable of addressing the situation. At the time the conflict started, the Ukrainian military had no units stationed east of the Dnipro River that could be deployed to combat separatists before they became entrenched.